At 6:47 local time, about 40 nautical miles northwest of Watsuri Island, the JS Kirisame, a Murasame-class destroyer of the Japan Maritime Self-Defense Force, was carrying out a routine but highly sensitive surveillance mission when the situation changed without warning. The Chinese warship CNS Hainan, a Luoyang 3 class guided missile destroyer, suddenly broke formation and surged toward the Japanese vessel. The message was obvious even without a word being spoken. Change course or we will force the issue. But the scene was already being watched closely. Nearby, the USS McCampbell DDG-85, an Arleigh Burke-class destroyer of the U.S. Navy, was tracking every move. Its Aegis combat system was fully active, reading the signatures of the entire Chinese formation. Within seconds, the Chinese destroyer was approaching the limit of what naval professionals around the world consider a safe maneuvering distance. Another few moments, and a tense encounter could have turned into a dangerous incident over 5 small, uninhabited rocks. This was not some random misunderstanding. It looked like a calculated test of the US-Japan security partnership, and it showed exactly why pushing against the combined strength of America and its allies in the East China Sea remains a very risky gamble. Tension in the East China Sea has rarely been tighter. What began as a normal Japanese patrol near waters under its control quickly escalated into a serious standoff when the People's Liberation Army Navy moved a 6-ship formation deeper into the disputed zone around the Senkaku Islands, known in Beijing as the Diaoyu Islands. For decades, these tiny uninhabited islands have been one of Asia's most sensitive flashpoints, protected under the 1960 Treaty of Mutual Cooperation and Security between the United States and Japan. Under that framework, an attack on territory administered by Japan would trigger a U.S. response. China's move, led by 2 Type 052D destroyers and backed by a Type 903A replenishment ship, followed a familiar gray zone playbook. The goal was not necessarily to open fire, but to create constant pressure through aggressive maneuvering, repeated close approaches, and a climate of uncertainty. The hope was that Japan would eventually back off, or that the wider region would begin to doubt the strength of the U.S. commitment. With trillions of dollars in annual trade moving through these sea lanes, even controlled instability can carry major consequences. The apparent mission of this Chinese formation was to push the JS Kirisame off station, probe for weak points in the joint surveillance network, and create footage that could be used later to suggest the U.S.-Japan alliance was hesitant or fragile. Instead, the American response was immediate, quiet, and highly disciplined. The USS McCampbell remained on the flank like a shadow, collecting a detailed electronic and tactical picture of the entire Chinese group. That is the difference between a regional challenge and a global alliance. The opposing force in this encounter was the Chinese People's Liberation Army Navy, a fleet that has expanded rapidly in size but still faces questions in areas such as real-world operational experience, command culture, and fully integrated doctrine. At the center of the formation was the Type 052D Luoyang, 3-class guided missile destroyer, often described by Beijing as its version of an Aegis warship. It is a capable platform, displacing around 7,500 tons and carrying 64 vertical launch cells. But China's approach here relied less on finesse and more on pressure and intimidation. Its motivations in this area are closely tied to political messaging at home, reinforcing historical claims through bold physical presence at sea. The psychological side of the mission mattered just as much as the tactical one. Chinese planners likely expected their larger formation to create hesitation, increasing the chance of a mistake by Allied crews. The Hainan was reportedly equipped with YJ-18 anti-ship cruise missiles, a serious threat designed for long range and high terminal speed. Supporting ships in the group included a Type 054A frigate, an electronic surveillance ship, and the replenishment vessel, all of which pointed to an effort to demonstrate sustained blue water reach. The overall strategy reflected a step-by-step pressure campaign, gradually narrowing the gap and testing how far they could go without crossing into open conflict. According to the scenario, the Chinese commander's instructions were straightforward. Stay close, force Kirisame to keep adjusting course, and gather as much information as possible on Allied sensor performance. The real danger was not only the weapons on board, but the doctrine behind the maneuver, using control disorder to wear down the tactical focus and mental discipline of the opposing bridge crew. The US and Japan answered that pressure with a textbook display of integrated capability. At the center of the response was the USS McCampbell, a Flight II A. Arleigh Burke-class destroyer displacing more than 9,000 tons. Its Aegis combat system and AN/SPY-1DV radar gave it a broad and detailed view of both the air and surface picture across the area. The ship's Mark 41 vertical launch system, loaded with standard missiles, gave it strong defensive reach well beyond visual range. The JS Kirasami, while smaller, was fully tied into the Allied network through cooperative engagement systems, allowing the Japanese destroyer to benefit from American tracking data in near real time. In effect, the two ships were no longer acting as separate vessels. They were functioning as parts of one larger combat network, sharing tracking and fire control quality information across miles of open water. Kirasami also brought its own strong local radar and defensive capability, making the pair far more difficult to pressure than they might have appeared from a distance. By contrast, while the Chinese Type 052D and its radar suite are capable, they are still often viewed as operating with limitations in processing efficiency and multi-target management when measured against the most mature Aegis baselines. On board McCampbell, every major system was working at high readiness. Its electronic warfare suite was silently monitoring Chinese radar emissions and communication traffic, capturing valuable signal data that could be analyzed long after the ships had separated. In that sense, the Chinese pressure tactic also handed the Alliance a rich stream of intelligence. The most dramatic moment came around 6:55 local time. The Hainan, having steadily increased speed, was now only about 700 yards off Kirisame's starboard side and still closing. Its intention appeared clear: execute a fast, close crossing in front of the Japanese destroyer's bow, forcing Kirisame to turn away sharply or accept a serious risk of collision. That kind of move could have produced the exact image Beijing wanted: a Japanese ship appearing to back down under pressure. Inside McCampbell's Combat Information Center, the mood was focused and controlled. The surface warfare team tracked the Chinese approach in real time. On the bridge, Commander David Axel Foley understood the stakes. A collision in those waters could quickly be spun into a broader regional crisis. But the crew had trained for this kind of near escalation many times. Their doctrine was simple: hold steady, show resolve, and remain ready to protect the Japanese ship if necessary. The order was given to place the electronic warfare system on active standby, intensify tracking, and secure a complete fire control picture. No missile was launched, and no shot was fired. But the U.S. systems began doing exactly what they were built to do: dominate the information space. Chinese sensors and communications reportedly began to experience disruption and instability. At the same time, the two Allied destroyers did something equally important. They did not waver. They maintained course and speed. That was the real message. No radio call could have said it more clearly. The ships were linked, ready, and fully aware. Faced with synchronized Allied resolve and growing electronic pressure, the Chinese commander made his decision. At 6:56, with only about 350 yards remaining before the crossing point, Hainan broke off the maneuver and turned hard to port. Its way cut sharply across the water, signaling an unmistakable tactical retreat. The pressure had reached its limit, and China blinked first. In the minutes that followed, the drama drained out of the encounter and gave way to the kind of calm professionalism that defines the U.S. Navy and the MSDF. Hainan rejoined the main Chinese formation, reducing speed and abandoning the attempt to disrupt the patrol. The operation had failed. Not only had it fallen short tactically, it had also publicly demonstrated the depth and confidence of the alliance it was trying to test. McCampbell and Kirasame continued on the same course at the same speed, sending a quiet but powerful signal. The terms of the encounter had not been set by Beijing. China also paid a price for the attempt. First came the strategic cost. The acceleration, maneuvering profile, and electronic activity of the Chinese ships gave Allied intelligence teams valuable data on performance limits, sensor behavior, and communication patterns. Second came the practical cost. A high-speed maneuver like that burns large amounts of fuel, adds wear to engines and systems, and consumes resources for little gain. And in this case, it ended with a visible loss of initiative. The immediate outcome was clear. The U.S. commitment to Japan held firm. The joint formation stayed intact. China was forced back into simple shadowing, exactly the status quo it had hoped to change. For the crew of McCampbell, the aftermath was measured and routine. Alert levels eased back to sustained watch. The event went into the log in simple professional language. Provocation countered, Allied course maintained, no deviation from patrol plan. And that is often what real military competence looks like. Not dramatic gestures, but the ability to prevent a crisis through discipline, preparation, and control. The lesson from the East China Sea is simple. Numbers alone do not decide these encounters. Beijing sent a modern and sizable formation, clearly hoping that mass and proximity would be enough to intimidate. Instead, it met a force that understands the board, the rules, and the value of synchronized action. This incident underscored that the Aegis system is more than an American asset. In practice, it serves as part of the command and control backbone of the U.S.-Japan alliance, allowing separate ships to operate as one unified defensive structure. Just as important was the human element. Sailors who held their course under real pressure and trusted their training. That is what matters most. Not just tonnage, not just fleet size, but discipline, readiness, and the ability to act as one.